Late in the evening, Colin Mercer paced the length of his living room, the muted tick of the wall clock making the silence heavier. Oh, it was nearly midnight, and Marissa still wasn't home. This time of night used to mean dinner together, their teenage son upstairs playing video games, laughter drifting between rooms. Now the house felt like a shell, too still, too cold, and Colin's chest ached with a pressure he couldn't shake. The glow from the street lamps outside barely reached through the blinds. Colin checked his phone for what felt like the 100th time. No message, no missed call. He dialed her number. 1 ring, 2, 3. Voicemail. He let the phone drop onto the couch and dragged his hands over his face, as if he could rub away the unease. Marissa had been working late far too often lately. First, it was a big project deadline, then last-minute meetings, then emergency client calls. All of this had started when her company got a new regional director, a 30-something go-getter named Dalton Reeves. A few months ago, Marissa had been a junior accountant. Now she was a senior financial manager, promoted faster than anyone in the office could remember. Her co-workers joked, a little too knowingly, that Dalton seemed to have taken a special interest in her. Colin had laughed it off at first, even felt proud of her success. But lately, that pride had been replaced with something darker. The sound of the key turning in the front door froze him. Marissa stepped inside, clearly startled to see him awake. "Hey," Colin said softly, his voice a mix of relief and restrained irritation. "Didn't expect you up," she replied, slipping off her heels. He caught a whiff of strong, expensive perfume, the kind she'd never worn before. Her hair was slightly mussed, lipstick faded, the white blouse she wore creased in ways that didn't come from sitting at a desk. "You didn't call?" he said quietly. "It's almost midnight. My phone died. Long day." Her tone was clipped, as if she hoped to end the conversation quickly. She moved toward the kitchen, tossing her purse onto the table. "This is the 3rd time this week, Marissa," he pressed, following her. "What's going on? Why are you staying so late?" "I told you, Colin. The project's critical. The whole department's working overtime. Dalton even brought champagne to celebrate a milestone today." Colin caught it, the faint scent of alcohol under her perfume. "You been drinking?" "Just 1 glass," she said, her voice turning defensive. "It's work. You think I can say no to the boss in front of everyone?" "Maybe you should say no to staying until midnight," he muttered. "You've got a family here." "A son," she spun around, eyes flashing. "Oh, so now my career's a problem? You want me to settle for your factory paycheck forever?" The words hit hard. Colin worked as a machinist at a plant on the edge of town. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. "This isn't about my paycheck," he said evenly. "It's about you coming home later and later, acting like..." "Like what?" she snapped. "Like someone who's trying to give us a better life?" The tension between them was a living thing now, crowding the narrow kitchen. She grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, took a long drink, and brushed past him toward the bedroom. Colin stood there for a long moment, listening to the click of the bedroom door. In the quiet, a memory stirred. A co-worker's offhand remark a week ago. "Your wife's really climbing the ladder these days. Guess Dalton's a good guy to know." That night, Colin lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling. By morning, they spoke only in clipped sentences. Before leaving for work, she tossed out a casual, "Friday night's the company party at the Magnolia. Don't wait up. Might stay with a friend if it runs late. Something in the way she said it made his stomach turn. I could pick you up, he offered. No, she said quickly, already at the door. It's employees only. I'll manage. The door shut, and Colin was left in a silence that seemed heavier than the night before. At lunch that day, he sat across from his oldest friend, Wade Callahan, in the plant cafeteria. You look like hell, Wade said, setting down his sandwich. Marissa, Colin muttered, pushing his food around the plate. She's barely home, always with Dalton, always some excuse. Friday she's got this party, told me not to bother showing up. Wade leaned back, squinting. And you're just going to sit here wondering? Hell no. You go. See for yourself. If she's clean, you go home. If she's not. He let the rest hang in the air. Colin stared at him. You think I should just walk in? Why not? If she's got nothing to hide, she won't care. But if she does, Colin sat in silence, the weight of the decision pressing on him. Somewhere deep down, he knew Wade was right. If he didn't see for himself, the doubt would eat him alive. Keep watching, he told himself. It only gets deeper. Friday came like a slow drumbeat. Colin finished his shift at the plant, dropped their son off at his mother's condo off North Shore Drive, and drove toward the downtown Knoxville with a knot in his stomach. The magnolias sat glowing on the corner. Brick facade, warm lights spilling through paned windows, the chatter of people dressed nicer than he was. He parked across the street and watched couples filter in, laughing, shoulders touching. He told himself he was just there to give Marissa a ride home. He told himself he was not a spy. Inside, no one stopped him. He blended into a group at the host stand and slid past into the banquet room where her company had gathered. Clinking glassware, a saxophone on the speakers, someone's too loud laugh. He kept to the edges, breath shallow, eyes scanning. He spotted her almost immediately. Marissa sat at a round table near the dance floor, navy dress catching the light, hair up in a loose twist that felt too intimate for a work party. Next to her, Dalton Reeves. Tanned, confident, tie loosened just enough to say he didn't have to try. He leaned toward Marissa, lips close to her ear. She smiled in a way Colin hadn't seen in months. Colin moved behind a pillar, pretending to check messages. His pulse thudded so hard he could feel it in his gums. He told himself he was being paranoid. Then Dalton's hand slid under the table. Marissa didn't flinch. She let it rest on her knee, turned, and gave him a look that wasn't workplace anything. Heat stabbed through Colin's chest. He gripped the phone until the case creaked. Not here, he thought. Not in front of everyone. He forced himself to wait, to breathe. If he exploded now, she'd call him crazy. She'd make him the problem. He needed the truth, undeniable and bare. A few minutes later, Dalton stood and smoothed his jacket, said something to the table, and walked out through a side hallway. Marissa counted 3 beats, dabbed her lipstick, and rose 2, clutching her small purse. She glanced around, at everyone and no one, before following. Colin swallowed the acid in his throat and moved, keeping distance. The hallway to the restrooms branched toward a service corridor. Dimmer light, a red exit sign humming, the faint smell of lemon cleaner. Voices murmured ahead, half-whispers punctured by soft laughter. A door stood ajar, a storage room with boxes stacked to the ceiling and a metal mop sink against the wall. 5 minutes, Dalton's voice, velvet and careless. No one will notice. Marissa's answer came breathless, almost a giggle. You're terrible. Colin didn't remember deciding to push the door. He only remembered the shock of fluorescent light and the blunt physical fact of them. Dalton's mouth on hers, Marissa's back to the wall, fingers in his lapel, her dress hitched just enough to signal intent. Dalton's hand skated up her thigh like he owned it. Something inside Colin snapped with a clean, merciless sound. The door banged. Marissa tore herself upright with a little cry, color draining from her face. Dalton froze, eyes going flat, then calculating. For one surreal second, the three of them stared at each other across the cramped room. Husband, wife, lover. Bodies awkwardly rearranging. Breath loud in the hum of the fluorescent. "Colin," Marissa whispered, hand to her mouth. "What are you—" "Don't," he said, voice low and shaking. "Don't you dare." Dalton lifted his palms in what he probably thought was a professional gesture. "Let's keep this civil. It's an unfortunate situation, but—" Colin's fist connected with Dalton's jaw before the word "situation" finished leaving his mouth. The impact traveled up Colin's arm, a numb, bright shock, and Dalton staggered back into a stack of boxes that rattled like thin thunder. He slid to the floor, cupping his face, eyes wide. "Security!" Marissa shrieked, then turned on Colin with a fury so immediate it made him step back. "Are you insane? You can't just—" "Insane!" The word tore out of him. "I'm insane because you're in a storage closet with your boss at your company party, because your dress is—" He broke off, breath scraping his ribs. "How long?" Marissa's chin tipped up, something defiant and ugly in her eyes. "Long enough to know he can give me a life you never could." The sentence hit harder than the punch. Dalton groaned, blood showing at the corner of his mouth, and tried to stand. Footsteps pounded in the hall. A manager, a server, someone in a security polo. Faces already arranging themselves into the human shape of scandal. Colin felt the whole scene tilting, as if the floor had gone wrong. "We have a son," he said, softer now, which made it worse. "And this is what you do? Don't you dare weaponize him against me," she snapped. "I worked for everything I've gotten. Do you think promotions fall out of the sky? You expect me to stay stuck while you punch a clock and call it sacrifice?" There it was. The contempt that had crept into their kitchen and made a home of the quiet. It killed every last inch of mercy in him. He stepped aside from the doorway, jaw tight. "We're done." "Sir," the security guard said, blocking the hall with a hand out. "We're going to need you to leave." Colin's laugh sounded like a cough. He shouldered past, barely feeling the guard's grip on his sleeve. Behind him, voices rose and tangled. Marissa's, Dalton's, the clatter of boxes, the rubbery squeak of the mop bucket. He hit the back exit and gulped the humid Tennessee night like air after drowning. Out in the dark, the anger trembled and broke. He braced his palms on the roof of his car and, for the first time since the clock started ticking and the perfume changed and the late nights piled up, he let himself shake. He didn't go home. He drove. Bridges over black water. The neon smear of diners on Kingston Pike. Finally, he pulled into Wade's driveway and sat with the engine off, listening to the ticking heat of the hood. When the porch light snapped on and Wade opened the door, Colin didn't have to say anything. Wade took one look at him and stepped aside. "Come in." Colin moved past him and into the small, familiar kitchen that smelled like coffee and motor oil. He rested his knuckles on the table, saw the torn skin across them, and felt nothing. "It's real," he said, voice hoarse, "all of it." Wade's jaw set. "Then we do this smart, not loud, not drunk. Smart Colin lifted his eyes. In the dull reflection of the kitchen window, he didn't recognize his own face. Tell me how. Wade set 2 mugs of coffee on the table, the steam curling into the dim light of the kitchen. Sit, he said, as if Colin might otherwise burn the restlessness into the floor. Colin lowered himself into the chair, hands still raw from the punch, eyes fixed on the grain of the table. You're not going back there tonight, Wade said. You're not giving her the screaming match she's expecting. That's the game she'll win. You need to think bigger. Colin let out a short, humorless laugh. Bigger than catching my wife with her boss in a closet. Bigger than losing twice, Wade shot back. Right now, she and Dalton think you're just some hothead who'll blow up and burn out. We're going to make sure they regret ever crossing you. The kind of regret that doesn't fade when the bruises do. Colin finally looked up, the bone-deep anger steadying into something colder. How? Wade leaned back, folding his arms. I've got a guy. Used to be a cop, knows how to dig without leaving footprints. He'll find out everything, where they meet, what they text, who else Dalton's been stepping on to get ahead. If there's dirt, he'll find it. Dirt won't change what I saw. No, Wade agreed. But it'll change what happens to them after. By the next afternoon, they were sitting in the corner booth of a diner off Kingston Pike, across from a stocky man in his 50s, with eyes that scanned the room even while he smiled. Name's Victor Paulson, he said, extending a calloused hand. Wade tells me you've got a problem. Colin didn't bother dressing it up. He told the story straight, no embellishments, no excuses. Victor listened without interrupting, sipping black coffee until Colin finished. So, Victor said at last, you want proof of the affair and maybe something extra on this Dalton Reeves? I want him exposed, Colin said, his voice low. To his company, to his wife, to anyone who matters to him. Victor's mouth ticked in something like approval. That can be arranged. And your wife? Colin hesitated only a second. Same. If she loses the job she climbed into his bed to get, all the better. Victor reached into his jacket and pulled out a small notebook. I'll need her work schedule, any numbers you have for him, details on where they like to go. The more I know, the more I can tail without being noticed. For the next hour, they laid it out. The Friday party, Marissa's late nights, Dalton's habit of parking 2 blocks from the office to smoke. Victor jotted notes in tidy, blocky letters. You said Dalton's married? Victor asked. Wade grinned. That's the beauty. He's got a wife and a kid. You know what happens when that blows up. Victor nodded. People like him don't expect the fire to start at home. I'll confirm it, get the address, maybe a few friendly pictures of him and your wife together. When it hits her doorstep, it'll hit hard. They shook on it. Give me a week, Victor said, sliding out of the booth. And get some sleep. You're going to need a clear head. The days that followed moved like molasses, every hour punctuated by Colin's phone lighting up with a text from Wade. Nothing yet. Be patient. But on the 4th evening, Wade called instead of texting. Meet at the diner, he said. Victor's got something. When Colin arrived, Victor already had a manila envelope on the table. Your wife and Dalton, he said, sliding the contents out. Photographs, grainy but unmistakable. The 2 of them walking into an apartment building. Leaving hours later, separately, Dalton glancing over his shoulder. Another shot, Dalton's arm around Marissa in a darkened parking lot. Colin's jaw clenched as he flipped through them. Address is on the back, Victor said. It's his rental, and here. He handed over another paper. Dalton Reeves, 33. Married to Stephanie Reeves, age 30, bank employee. Daughters 5. Home address. Cell numbers for both. Colin stared at the neat typeface on the page, feeling the first real flicker of control since that night. There's more, Victor said. Your boy Dalton's in bed with a contracting firm that's been feeding on his company's budget. I've got names, dates, and a rumor about kickbacks that'll smell real bad to the right people. Colin looked at Wade. You thinking what I'm thinking? Wade's grin was all teeth. Oh, I'm thinking. Emails to his CEO, copies to HR, and a nice little package for the Mrs. Reeves. Victor stood, tucking his notebook away. I can make sure it all lands where it should without your name on it. Just say the word. Colin didn't hesitate. Do it. That night, the plan came to life. Anonymous emails with photos and timelines sent to the top brass at Marissa's firm. A sealed envelope for Stephanie Reeves, delivered by courier to her porch. And a discreet phone call from one of Victor's old friends in law enforcement to the local economic crimes unit. Colin went to bed for the first time in weeks without replaying the closet in his head. He didn't smile, but when sleep came, it was heavy and unbroken. By midweek, the first cracks appeared. Wade texted Colin early Tuesday morning. Check your email. There it was, a forwarded message from a friend inside Marissa's company. The subject line read, Urgent, Internal Review. The body was short, clipped, effective immediately. Dalton Reeves is on administrative leave pending investigation. All personnel are reminded to cooperate fully. Colin stared at the screen, feeling a slow burn of satisfaction spread through his chest. He scrolled down, another note, this one from HR to the entire staff. Ms. Marissa Mercer is relieved of her current duties until further notice. No explanation, no sympathy, just the sterile finality of corporate language. That evening, Wade dropped by unannounced, grinning like a man who just won a bet. Guess who's been cleaning out her desk under the watchful eye of security? Colin raised an eyebrow. Your soon-to-be ex. And Dalton? Let's just say he didn't get to take the elevator down. Walk of shame, my friend. Front lobby, boxes in hand. Colin exhaled, leaning against the kitchen counter. And Stephanie Reeves? Wade's grin widened. Got the envelope Saturday morning. By Sunday night, she'd posted a Facebook status about removing toxic people and changed her profile picture to just her and the kid. Dalton's been sleeping at a buddy's apartment since then. It wasn't enough, not yet, but it was a start. 2 days later, the other shoe dropped. A local business journal ran a short piece. City contractor under investigation for possible kickbacks. They didn't name Dalton directly, but they didn't have to. Anyone in his industry could connect the dots. Victor's contact in the economic crimes unit had clearly done his job. Colin read the article twice over breakfast, a faint hum of vindication in his veins. That night, Marissa called. He let it ring out. She texted instead, "We need to talk, please." He didn't reply. By Friday, she was standing at his doorstep. She looked different, hair pulled back without care, dark circles under her eyes, dressed in jeans and a sweatshirt instead of her usual polished office wear. "You did this," she said as soon as he opened the door. Colin didn't move aside. "You destroyed your own life. I just made sure there were witnesses." Her voice broke. "I lost my job, Colin. Dalton won't even answer my calls. Everyone at the firm knows. I can't." "You can't what? Pretend it didn't happen?" He leaned on the doorframe. "When you were in that closet, you didn't think about the job? the marriage, our son. You thought about yourself. She flinched, looking down at the porch boards. I made a mistake. No, he said quietly. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. This was a choice. Repeatedly. Marissa swallowed hard. Can we at least talk about Ian? He shouldn't see us like this. Ian will be fine, Colin said. He's with my mom this weekend. And when we go to court, I'm not fighting you for custody. He needs stability. You'll have the house, I'll have my freedom. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't argue. Is that it then? That's it. She turned and walked down the steps without another word. Colin shut the door, leaning back against it, the muffled sound of her car fading into the night. Wade stopped by later with 2 beers and a nod toward the living room. It's done, he said simply. Dalton's career, finished. Your ex? She's not bouncing back from this anytime soon. Colin took the beer, sank into the couch. The bitterness was still there, but it was no longer running the show. Doesn't bring back what she took. No, Wade said, but it keeps her from doing it to you again. For the first time in weeks, Colin allowed himself a long, slow breath. It didn't feel like victory exactly, more like the first clear sky after a storm. And somewhere under that quiet, the sense that maybe, just maybe, life wasn't finished with him yet. The weeks after the fallout moved differently. The urgency was gone, replaced by a strange stillness. Colin found himself working longer hours at the plant, not because he had to, but because the rhythm of the machines and the predictable routine felt safe. No surprises, no lies. On Fridays, he'd pick up Ian from his mother's and take him for burgers at a little diner near the river. They'd talk about school, baseball practice, and the kind of things that kept Colin from drifting too far into his own head. Marissa stayed quiet. No calls, no texts. When the divorce paperwork came, he signed without ceremony. She kept the house, as promised, and primary custody of Ian. He got every other weekend and Wednesday dinners. It wasn't perfect, but it was clean. One late summer weekend, Wade showed up at his place with that look, the one that meant Colin wasn't getting a choice. You're coming to the lake, Wade said, tossing him a duffel bag. Don't argue. Sun, water, cold beer, maybe some decent company. You need it. Colin rolled his eyes, but by Saturday afternoon, he was standing on the wooden dock at Norris Lake, the sun warm on his shoulders, watching boats drift across the glittering water. A small group of Wade's friends milled around a picnic table under the pines, laughing over a cooler of drinks. That's when he saw her. She was sitting on the edge of the dock with her bare feet in the water, a paperback in her hands. Dark hair pulled into a loose braid, sunglasses perched on her head, the hem of her sundress fluttering in the breeze. When she glanced up and caught him looking, she smiled. Easy, genuine, like she'd been doing it all her life. Hi, she said as he walked over. You must be Colin. Wade's told me exactly 2 things about you. You work too much, and you don't know how to relax. He laughed, a little embarrassed. Both are true. I'm Natalie, she said, closing the book, and I'm pretty sure that's fixable. They ended up talking for an hour on the dock, about music, travel, the lake, the way Tennessee summers seemed to stretch and slow time. Colin caught himself smiling more than he had in months, even laughing at her dry jokes. When Wade wandered over with 2 cold beers, he gave Colin a subtle nod, the kind only an old friend could get away with. That evening, as the sun melted into the horizon and the sky went streaked with orange and pink, Colin found himself sitting next to Natalie at the picnic table, sharing plates of grilled chicken and sweet corn. She told him about her job teaching art at a local elementary school, about the stray dog she'd adopted last spring, about her dream of someday opening a little studio in town. In return, he told her just enough. About Ian, about working at the plant, about how he'd been through a rough stretch, but was trying to find his footing again. She didn't press for details. She didn't give him the tilted head pity look he'd come to dread. She just listened, nodding, occasionally smiling in a way that made him feel lighter. By the time Wade started packing up, Colin realized he didn't want the night to end. When Natalie stood to leave, she hesitated, then pulled a small card from her bag, her number written in looping handwriting. "Call me," she said, "even if it's just for coffee or a walk, or to prove you can, in fact, relax." Driving home, the card sat in his cup holder. The past was still there, an ache he knew wouldn't vanish overnight. But for the first time in a long time, the road ahead didn't feel so narrow. Colin didn't call right away. He told himself he was busy with work, with Ian's school schedule, with everything else life had thrown at him. But the truth was simpler. He was nervous. It had been a long time since he'd let anyone close, and the last time had ended in fire. A week later, on a quiet Wednesday night, after dropping Ian back at Marissa's, he pulled Natalie's card from the kitchen drawer. He stared at the looping handwriting for a long minute, then dialed. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm. "I was starting to think you'd lost my number." "I almost did," he admitted, smiling despite himself. "How about that coffee?" They met the next day at a small cafe downtown, the kind with chalkboard menus and mismatched mugs. Conversation was easy, unforced. She teased him about ordering plain black coffee. He asked about her art classes, listened as she described the chaos and joy of teaching 8-year-olds how to paint. One coffee became a walk along the river. One walk became dinner the following week. Before long, it was just part of the rhythm. Thursday nights, Saturday afternoons, sometimes a quick lunch if their schedules lined up. It was different from anything he'd had before. There was no rush, no pressure. Natalie didn't need him to be anyone but himself. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. When he introduced her to Ian 2 months later, he worried how his son might react. But Natalie brought a board game and a bag of homemade cookies. And within an hour, Ian was teaching her the rules while Colin watched from the kitchen, feeling something unclench in his chest. Autumn turned to winter, and the sharp edges of the past began to dull. Marissa stayed on the periphery, occasional texts about Ian, brief exchanges at drop-offs and pickups. She never mentioned Dalton again. Colin didn't ask. One snowy evening, the three of them, Colin, Ian, and Natalie, were in the kitchen making homemade pizza. Ian was scattering pepperoni with deliberate precision, while Natalie rolled out dough. Colin leaned against the counter, watching them, and felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the oven. It wasn't about replacing what he'd lost. It was about building something new, something honest. Later that night, after Ian had gone to bed, Natalie curled up next to him on the couch. The snow outside caught the glow from the streetlights, falling in slow, lazy spirals. "You know," she said softly, "for a guy who supposedly doesn't know how to relax, you're doing pretty well." He smiled, resting his hand over hers. "Guess I had a good teacher." For the first time in a long time, Colin wasn't thinking about what had been taken from him. He was thinking about what he had and what could be. Because the truth was, betrayal had changed him, but it hadn't ended him. And as he sat there in the quiet with someone who saw him clearly and stayed anyway, he knew one thing for certain. The worst was behind him, and the rest of his life was wide open. For the first time in years, the heaviness in Colin's chest felt lighter, as if winter had finally loosened its grip. The pain, the anger, the betrayal, they were still part of his story, but no longer the whole of it. Sitting there with Natalie's hand in his, the soft glow of snow outside their window, he realized he was no longer surviving, he was living. And maybe that was the greatest victory of all. Because life had given him reasons to give up, yet here he was, choosing to love again, to trust again, to hope again. The past had shaped him, but it would not define him. As the laughter from earlier in the evening echoed in his mind, he knew one thing for certain. The road ahead was his to write, and it was wide open. And in that quiet moment, Colin understood. Sometimes the best chapters come after the ones we thought would be our last.